So I think my company actually made a mistake today because they let me off for the 4th of July. It's one of the reasons why I didn't answer my phone today, and I've kind of kept my phone turned off. They're a bit notorious for scheduling you to have a day off and then calling you in at the last minute. I mean, it doesn't really do much good to complain with these people, but I have said one or two times, what's the purpose of giving me a day off if you're just going to call me in on that day off anyway? It's kind of like not too long ago they scheduled me to actually get out early on time, is what I mean by early, but actually on time at the end of my shift, and before I could even walk through the door that morning, they already come to me and want me to do more time. But anyway, I had a couple of different thoughts running through my mind before I started out this video. As a matter of fact, what I've been wanting to do lately is to open up more videos about the AA literature and attack it, and do a few more things more in depth about the actual cult itself and its doctrine. You hear so many people say it's the people that make AA bad. It's not the AA itself. AA is a perfect program, and I want to prove that that's a bunch of bullshit. But this week I happened to stumble across an article, and actually, to be honest, if I actually did a video on every bad article that there is out there about crooked rehabs or about halfway houses or injustices done with drug courts or even at AA meetings, I mean, I could make a video every day and I wouldn't probably be able to cover all of it. And that's just the stuff that I know about. There's no telling what all is going on that's not even making it into the newspapers. But it's interesting. This week I kind of encountered a little bit of friction with some people. Nothing really major, but they were talking about abrasiveness, and they were talking about alienating people by the way, not really so much me, but they were talking about, being more diplomatic, and they didn't want to ruin their chances. I guess for whatever, like if you're going to really talk to a cult member, you should be polite and, use finesse and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, maybe, that's true probably for a lot of people. It's probably the best thing to do if you were ever going to enter into the public forum about this thing, to actually legitimately debate it, like in front of a television audience or something like that. But I mean, here on the way I operate and the way I come across, I mean, whether it's perceived as abrasive or whether it's perceived as being rude, or it kind of irks me when people use the word bullying. That's just me, the way I am. I'm not foolish enough to believe I'm actually having an influence on anybody out here anyway. The one reason I do this is because I remember when I was alone in the cult, and they actually had me convinced that the bullshit they were feeding me was real. It would have done me a world of good to have been able to stumble across someone that was calling it out for the phony crap that it is, and that's primarily the motivation for why I'm doing this. Do I believe I actually have an influence or something like that? Yeah, well, I'm not that freaking important. But anyway, I'm not going to try to be polite or finesse or anything else. But it's funny about the word bullying. It makes me want to bring up something that happened this week. I was reading, and I hated to hear about it. His name is not too well known among people that well, it's just not that well known. Harlan Ellison, the writer, passed away at the age of 84 in his sleep. He was a prolific writer, primarily known for his short stories. He wrote over 1,700 of them. He was still writing all the way up to his death. But he called himself the most contentious man on the planet, and, well, it was a title well earned. He could be very abrasive. He could be very blunt. He could be actually very friendly and very tolerant, depending on how you came across to him, or how, or the way you approached him or the way you handled him. I should put it that way. But when it comes to major film production companies, or when it comes to television stations, or when it comes to big-time directors or multi-million-dollar studios, they hated him, and he was kind of their enemy. And there was an interview with him in the 1980s. As a matter of fact, his personality is almost as lively as any fiction he ever wrote. And he wrote some really good fiction. It was oftentimes shocking, graphic, and a lot of other things. But it was the type of stuff that stayed in your head long after, and it made you think. And I think that's one of the reasons why he's popular among his fans. But his personality was probably as lively as any of his fiction. But he was on a 1980s interview where he was talking about taking on these big television studios, which were known for primarily, ripping off people, people's artwork, people's writing, people's whatever, and paying, whoever was behind the creative force behind a project a pitiful amount of money to get rid of them, and just, in turn, turning around and making millions off of it. You do have to kind of remember, during this time period, there was no YouTube, there was no Amazon, there was no DeviantArt, there was no blogs, there was no, there was no forums or outlets or anything else for you to express your, be whatever your forte is in art, or whatever your form is, or whatever. There wasn't any way to do that. I mean, if you were going to publish a book in those days, you had to answer to the publishing companies. If you were going to write for television, you had to answer to the television stations. And a whole bunch of people told him when he got ripped off, and I don't remember what the matter was, because he was always in a fight or suing somebody or in an argument with the director over something. But they told him pretty much, you can't do anything about this, because, these major studios, they've got all the money, they've got all the attorneys, they've got all the power, and they'll just destroy your life and destroy your career. You'll never get another book out. You'll never get another script ever published. And he managed to find an attorney that was crazy enough to do it, with him, to take him on. And he was talking on the television about how many people he knew of personally that were behind, let's just say, something that became a major blockbuster or something that became a hit series, but how the original person who had the idea behind it, the creativeness behind it, didn't get anything for it. That there were certain people whose ideas were stolen and they never got any credit for it whatsoever. And he was talking about how this was such a landmark victory, not just so much for himself, but for everyone, because it was letting the public know at large that, yeah, you can fight back against the major monoliths and you can fight back and win. But when I was looking through the comments down there below, there was a lot of people that said, well, he's really, angry, or he's really abrasive, or, and a few of them said he comes across as very bullying. Well, he takes on the major monoliths that's got the $1 billion that have been fucking people over for years and stealing from them, but he's the bad guy. Is that what you're trying to say? And I'm not comparing myself to Mr. Ellison. I would never even think about doing that. There's no way I'll ever, I'm not even a creative artist of anything, I'm not even in league, with anything, even remotely close to him. But I do think it's funny how sometimes when you speak out on an issue and you're outraged and you're pissed off and you want to really bluntly, hit people between the eyes with the truth, all of a sudden, especially cult members, but even others, will turn around and say, well, you're abrasive, you're mean, you got so much anger in you, you need to let go of the anger, Well, when it comes to shit like, when it comes to shit like this fucking cult, of course I'm angry. In my personal life, in my everyday ordinary life, I'm not really, I'm really not. I'm not going to try to convince you. You probably wouldn't believe me, but I'm really not that angry of a guy. But when I get to talking about this, especially with my own experiences and what I know that is going on, but the experience of other people that I talk to, and especially articles like the shit that I'm about to touch on in this video, how can you not be angry? How can you not be abrasive? How can you not be outraged by the shit that's going on? But this article concerns something that's almost personal to me, because it's about drug court abuse. And I did a little video on drug court, and I wasn't even able to cover a tenth of the crap that I put up with in there. But I thought that I knew just how bad things were out there when it come to rehabs and halfway houses, because I've seen the utter scum of the earth in behind these things and operating these things. But this really takes the cake for me. I've never, I was just incredulous reading it. I just couldn't believe it. But it involves this company, this treatment rehab center that court orders, drug court clients. And by the way, before I get into the article itself, a lot of these people that are in this program are still awaiting sentencing. Okay, they haven't even pled guilty. They haven't even been found guilty of what they're doing. Judges just put them in this thing because, and it's popular because this talking about drug reform in this country, it really bothers me at times, because people are quick to say, no, we shouldn't put the people in prison, which I agree with, but we should send them to treatment. Yeah, but if treatment is worse than the fucking prisons, then we're really not doing anything to solve the public health problem at all. It reminds me of when I was in drug corps. The whole entire time that you're in there, the entire existence of the whole entire thing, every day what hangs over your shoulder is you'll do this, or we'll throw you back in jail. You'll go to this meeting and you'll let these people talk to you any kind of way they want to, and you will not say anything back, or we'll put you back in jail. You will sit in these groups, and if you don't share what we want you to share, we'll put you back in jail. If you don't do this, we'll put you back in jail. If you don't say that, we'll put you back in jail. And then in this really smarmy ass attitude of theirs, they would say, but you have a choice. That used to really kill me. I don't have the definition of Hobson's choice in front of me to read it off here, but that used to really piss me off to no end. That's like telling someone, you could be horribly, brutally, physically assaulted here, or you could be, mutilated and maimed over there, but you have a choice. It's entirely up to you how this plays out. You have a choice in the matter. Well, you don't really have much of a fucking choice in a situation like that, but that's exactly what happened in this guy's story. Here he was, his name was Brad McGahee, and a judge decided to spare him from prison. He was busted for buying a stolen horse trailer, nothing to do with addiction, fell behind on some fines and didn't quite meet up with his probation officer on time. So this drug court judge said he had another plan for him. He wanted him to learn a work ethic. I'm sending you to and I'm going to call it CAIR. It's CAIR. It's called Christian Alcoholics and Addicts in Recovery. Locals nickname it the Chicken Farm. It's a rural retreat where defendants stay for a year. They get addiction treatment by, going to NA or AA, and supposedly are taught to live more productive lives. Many of them are sent there from the courts across the state and neighboring states, part of a nationwide push to keep nonviolent offenders out of prison. Aside from the daily cans of coffee and Dr. Pepper, McGahee wasn't addicted to anything. The judge even knew that. But the judge told him the chicken farm, after all, was better than prison. A few weeks later, as he was standing in front of a speeding conveyor belt inside a frigid poultry plant, pulling guts and stray feathers from slaughtered chickens, destined for major fast food restaurants and grocery stores, he didn't see that there was much substance abuse treatment. It was mainly factory work from one of America's top poultry companies. If anybody who was sentenced to work there got hurt, or they worked too slowly, or they couldn't meet production, their bosses threatened them with prison. And they worked for free. The treatment center industry, CAIR, C-A-I-R, Christian Alcoholics and Addicts, they kept the pay. So we're talking about a slave camp. But soon things were about to get worse. It says across the country, these judges are increasingly sending people to these rehabs instead of prison or jails. But this is not really what I'd call rehab. I'd just call it slave labor. These diversion courts have become actually the bedrock of criminal justice reform, aiming to transform lives and ease overcrowded prison. But in a rush to spare people from prison, some judges are steering defendants into rehabs that are lucrative work camps for a private industry. And it says this particular program this guy was ordered into, said they would promise the people ordered into it freedom from addiction. The beneficiaries of these programs span all over the country, Fortune 500 companies, factories, local businesses. And it says no better rehab exemplifies this allegiance to big business better than CAIR. It was started in 2007 by chicken company executives struggling to find workers. By forming a Christian rehab and partnering with AA, they could supply plants with a cheap and captive labor force while helping men overcome their addictions. So these 200 or so guys, they live on this compound. They work for a company that gets an annual revenue of $1.4 billion, and they spend notoriously long hours in dangerous conditions. Many men said their hands were gnarled after days spent hanging thousands of chickens from metal shackles. One man said he was badly burned with acid while hosing down a trailer. Others were maimed by machines or contracted serious bacterial infections. So those who were hurt and could no longer work were often kicked out and sent back to prison. Most men worked through their pain and injuries because they were afraid of the same thing. it's a work camp, this one guy says. They know people are desperate to stay out of jail, and they'll do whatever they can to stay out of prison. The article here, I'll even post a copy of the link at the bottom of this video. It says scores of former participants and employees have hundreds of pages of court documents, tax filing, and workers' records. At some rehabs, defendants may be able to keep some amount of their pay, but at many of them, most of them, they do not. Here's the kicker. Legal experts said forcing defendants to work for free doesn't necessarily violate constitutional rights. The 13th Amendment bans slavery, and it bans involuntary servitude, but the case is exempted when it comes to punishment for convicts. So prison labor programs are legal. But yet many of the people that are sent to these particular camps are not even convicted of the crimes. In one particular case, many defendants had their cases dismissed. So, but the organization CAIR has become indispensable to the criminal justice system, even though judges appear to be violating the drug court law by using it in many cases, because many drug courts throughout the country are supposed to be required to send defendants for treatment at certified programs with trained counselors and state oversights. Well, I'm going to tell you something right now. When I was in drug court, if those assholes were trained counselors, I'd really fucking hate to see, I'd really fucking hate to see what the people without any training at all were. I mean, I don't know about state oversight. I mean, none of the shit that I was tied up in during my time in drug court had anything to do with state oversight. I didn't see no regulations. I know the fucking halfway houses that I saw and have talked about in other videos certainly were free from any kind of regulations or inspections or anything like that. It says many hundreds of people are sent there each year by the courts throughout Oklahoma, Arkansas, Texas, and Missouri. The men in the program get bunk beds, meals, and Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. If there's time between work shifts, they can meet with a counselor, a sponsor, or attend classes on parenting or anger management. First 4 months, church is mandatory. These men are not allowed phones. They're not allowed to contact their families. They're not allowed any contact with the outside world. Speaking about the program to anybody in the plant can result in being sent back to prison. This is just totally unfucking believable. So how did this whole thing get started? Well, this convicted meth dealer said he went into this HR office all the way back in 2003 with this story and this actual proposal. He said he had found Jesus and he had overcome his addictions and decided to start a rehab. He said that the company could take a chance and hire his men as they were cheap and could work any and all hours, and their wages would fund his recovery program. Says the company called it a win-win-win situation. They were so taken with the idea that 4 years later, another program nearly identical was created. And it goes on to talk about, it just keeps on. I mean, this has actually become a lucrative business. People around the country that open up these rehabs actually pitch the idea to these companies. They pitch the idea to these companies that the companies can save a whole lot of money and get, unlimited labor, and the companies apparently, the paychecks all go to the rehab itself. It's quite a nice scam they got going on, and the judicial system is tied up into it. This is a very long and lengthy article, and I'm skipping on down through. I think I've highlighted most of the key points, but it talks about certain people who had severe mental health problems that were sent there by judges, and that they were told that they couldn't take their medication, and if anything happened, they were sent back to prison. In fact, there's one case here that I'm looking at where a guy was denied his medication, was sent to work at one of these plants, that he ended up out of desperation running away, and he was found dead by the side of the church parking lot a few weeks later. It says the examiners found no drugs in his already badly decomposed body and weren't able to determine the cause of death. It says the men who had mental breakdowns or manic episodes were just kicked out and sent back to prison. Well, I mean, this is supposed to be a rehab that's supposed to, by this fucking judge's own statement, teaches you the work ethic. And this is a fucking work ethic. Partnering up with crooked fucking corporations to get indentured servants and slave labor. And actually, I have no fucking words for this. I can't even believe that shit like this is going on. I mean, I knew about some rehab programs like this, not to this extent, but I knew a couple of places in this current city where I live that had that they were called missions, is what they were called. They were a place that mainly got the homeless, but they had an alcohol and drug program, and you had to stay in the mission for however many months. I don't remember. I knew a couple of guys that actually got kicked out of it because it wasn't a very safe environment. They just let anybody in off the streets, and I mean, they didn't try to protect the people in the shelter itself. People got their stuff stolen. They got assaulted when they were trying to sleep. They weren't given bunk beds. The first few months, they had to sleep on a gym floor, and after an extended period of time staying there, they were sent to some farm. Believe it or not, I wished I had a link to that place because I'd posted below in this video about it, because they were supposedly sent to some farm for an indeterminate amount of time. And of course, it was one of these guys that was big with the local fucking politicians and everything. He puts his fucking face on camera and he talks about how he's trying to make a difference, and he's trying to save lives, and he's trying to do all this other stuff. And, this is one of the things that just makes me really fucking angry, and it really outrages me to read about this kind of bullshit, and to know this kind of bullshit's going on, but yet I'm not supposed to be abrasive when I talk about this kind of stuff. The thing that really worries me about this because this is going to be popular among many people, and I don't know if there's many people aware of this, but it's going to be popular among people that think that reform is actually a better alternative than prison, because they'll get away with this by telling everybody, well, we're helping them not be in prison, we're helping them turn their lives around, we're teaching them, we're letting them work, we're giving them a place to live. And people won't have any fucking idea what's really going on behind the scenes. They won't have any idea of the human rights abuses. They won't have any idea of what's being done to these people. And one of the sad aspects of the society we live in, you can go to any article on the web anywhere that talks about drug addiction or alcohol abuse or anything like that, and you can see that if you have a problem with alcohol or drugs, you're viewed in this society as less than human. It's almost like society in general gives everybody a free pass to treat people who are on drugs and alcohol any kind of fucking way they see fit, because after all, these people chose to do that to themselves, or something like that. I mean, it's really reprehensible to me that shit like this will go on, and you could point this out to people in the public spectrum, and they'd say something like, well, they're all criminals anyway, or, well, they're just drug addicts, or, well, they're just drunks, and forget about the fact that, the primary purpose of the word rehab and rehabilitation is rehabilitation, okay, not punish. I mean, that's supposed to be, the key word of rehab. I mean, if you want to turn this thing into saying, okay, it's acceptable to send people into forced labor, like some fucking Soviet gulag, and say that that's what we're going to do to people who are unfortunate enough to get addicted to alcohol and drugs, then you can do that. But don't fucking call it rehab. Don't fucking sit there and tell me that you're about helping transform lives and keep people out of prison when you don't give a flying fuck about these people's lives. All you give a fuck about is padding your fucking pocketbooks and looking good for your next election year when you do this kind of shit. This is drug court. This is what drug court is going to morph and evolve into, okay? It's going to evolve into a big business and a big profit. I was looking online about the drug reform in other countries where they tried the decriminalizing aspect and how it worked, but the thing that bothered me was I saw that word treatment, and I don't know how it works in those other places. I've never been, to those places. And I have no idea about the way those patients are treated, but I know in this country alone, when you say the word treatment, you might as well say the word prison. It's synonymous. I mean, putting someone in a chicken manufacturing plant and telling them if they get injured that they can go back to prison for doing it, denying mental health patients their right to take medications and sending them back to prison if they have a fucking breakdown or die, and sweeping it under the rug, that's not fucking rehabilitation. You know, this really pisses me off. I mean, but I'm more incredulous than I am anything else when I'm reading this. I just can't fucking believe that something like this goes on. And you know, you tell anybody about it in the streets, you know, well, they're just criminals. You know, they're just drug addicts. You know, I still can't get over that article I read not too long ago about how many lives were saved by Narcan in this city, because heroin is at a major epidemic level in this city. And a lot of the police use Narcan, you know, to revive. And I just still can't get over how many fucking people commented on that article saying they should just let them die and save us all the money. You know, we should just let the people die. You know, oh, you're such fucking badasses when you're typing all these fucking comments on articles. You know, I mean, you wouldn't say that if you were the one strung out on it. Maybe you're subhuman enough that you would feel that way if one of your kids got like that, and you would say, well, just let them die. I mean, maybe you really are that low down. But, you know, it's an image in my head that just is not easily going away anytime soon. Anyway, I got a little irritated there with that one, but that's all I'm gonna do for this particular episode. I got another day off coming up sometime soon, I think, and hopefully I'll start diving into topics, you know, and start tearing that up again. But you know, it's just, I don't even know where to begin to say how you would fight something like this. I guess the only thing that you could really do with something like this that's going on is just share this article everywhere you can. You know, every time that you know, share it to everybody you know. I mean, just put it out there everywhere that this is what rehab means. You know, I remember watching. I don't remember what YouTuber it was doing it, but they were asking random people off the street, you know, what should you do with people who have alcohol problems, and you know, 99% of them, without even thinking, it was just like a trained response. It was without even any thought behind it. Well, you need to send them to rehab, and you need to send them to AA. I mean, like hell you fucking do. Anyway, till next week.